Can God's existence be demonstrated from reason apart from the Bible? And what is the most important doctrine or attribute of God ever in the history of the church? We're going to look at that question in this video and in the next. Now, before I can talk about that attribute, I need to set the stage and give some foundation for what that attribute is and what it means and why Christians have held to that. People have held to that view ever since the earliest times in the Christian church, and even outside of the Christian church, people have held to God being this, having this attribute, even before Christians did. So, what is that? Well, we'll get to that. But the first question we want to look at, and this is a double duty kind of topic, is one: can God's existence be demonstrated, that is, proven, without resort to the Bible? This has been a contentious issue, even among Christians. And we're going to look at one argument in particular, because this argument will set up the argument I'm going to give next time on the most important and foundational attribute of God. Because that attribute, if you hold to that attribute, your entire view of theology goes in this direction over here. And if you don't hold that attribute, then your whole view of God goes in a totally different direction. So we're going to get to that. But can we prove God's existence outside of the Bible? Now, there are several arguments, or many arguments, for God's existence. And there are two general types. One is an a priori demonstration, and one is an a posteriori demonstration. A priori means that you know something prior to, hence the prior and a priori. And a posteriori demonstration is when you demonstrate something based on experience or reality. So a posteriori demonstration, when it comes to God's existence, will use the effects of God, that is the universe, to argue for a first cause. A priori arguments start with God as a definitional aspect, like Anselm did with the ontological argument. So what is the ontological argument? It says God is a being that which none greater can be conceived. It is better to exist in reality and not in the mind alone. Therefore, God must exist in reality. So Anselm held to this, and the basic punchline of the argument is, well, if I can conceive of something greater than God existing in reality, then God isn't the most, that being greater than which none other can be conceived. So if I can conceive of God both in the mind and in reality, then if he existed only in the mind, then I would be able to know a greater being actually in reality. So that would be a contradiction. So that's been a very contentious argument, even among theists, ever since Anselm made that argument. Now, the argumentation I'm going to give you right now for God's existence is the first of the famous 5 ways from Thomas Aquinas. Now, Aquinas rejected Anselm's ontological argument because he didn't think we can prove God just by definition. And he didn't think we could actually define God in his very essence, which is what Anselm really is trying to do. So I'm going to give you the first of the 5 ways tonight. Aquinas thinks this is the most obvious way to prove God regarding the 5 ways. And if this argument is sound, that is, if the premises are true and the logic is valid, then this argument is, in my opinion, the most important argument for God's existence ever, because it not only proves God's existence, it also demonstrates this foundational attribute that has been, well, foundational ever since the foundation of the church. And it has been the classical view of God ever since ever since the church has been around. So what is this first argument, this first way from Thomas Aquinas? I'm going to read it to you and explain a little bit along the way, and then I'm going to just kind of break it down and summarize it and explain why it is so important. So here is the first way from Thomas Aquinas. The first and more manifest way, most obvious way, he says, is the argument from motion. Now, right off the bat, we got to explain that word motion. Motion does not mean something is in inertia. Okay, so if I take my little lens cap for my camera and just toss it across the room like it's a little frisbee, then it will be in movement from here to there in the sense of inertia. That's not what Aquinas means here. He means motion by motion. He just means change. He says that things are in change. Change, just the medieval word for motion just means change, and that goes back to Aristotle's use of the word motion for change. So this is an Aristotelian type argument that Aquinas is using. So motion doesn't mean inertia; it means change. Inertia is a type of change, but change is broader than simply inertia in general. So the first and more manifest way is the argument for motion. It is certain and evident to our senses, he says, that in the world some things are in motion. That is, they're changing. Leaves change color, they drop, they get blown from here to there. We get bigger, our hair changes color, it gets longer, whatever. So all around us we see change. That's all. I mean, again, that's what motion means, change. Now, whatever is in motion or is in change is put in motion by another. For nothing can be in motion except it is in potentiality to that towards which it is in motion, whereas a thing moves inasmuch as it is in act. So these notions of act and potency here are going to be integral for Aquinas' argument. And again, they go back to Aristotle's metaphysics and the way of talking about reality. When Aristotle and Aquinas use the word act, they really just mean something in existence. So something that is actual. So I'm in act, the books behind me are in act, the microphone is an act, you're in act. That means you're being, you have existence, you are actually there, actually existing. That's all the word means. Potentiality comes from the Latin potentia, which means power, or in this case, ability to change. So something is potential in the sense that it has power to become something that it's not. So I am sitting right now, but I have the power or the potential to stand up. Once I stand up, I'll be actually standing. I will have actualized that potential. I'm actually sitting right now, so I've actualized that potential according to what Aristotle and Aquinas say. For motion, again, that is, again, change is nothing else than the reduction of something from potency to actuality. That is, a change is nothing more than something going from being potentially X to actually X. So my grass is potentially green if it's brown. It's actually green when it is green. So, but nothing can be reduced from potentiality to actuality. Nothing can be changed except by that something in a state of actuality. So something has to be in existence in order to cause a change. So if X changes Y, X has to be in order to change Y. It has to be actual, it has to exist. So something can't cause a change in Y, whatever Y stands for, if that thing causing the change isn't itself an existing thing. Okay? So it continues. Thus, that which is actually hot, as fire, makes wood, which is potentially hot, to be actually hot, and thereby moves and changes it. So if you go camping and you want to make a fire, the wood you gather is potentially hot or could be set on fire. It has that potential, that power, that capability. So that which is actually hot as fire makes wood, which is potentially hot, to be actually hot, and thereby moves and changes it. Now, it is not possible that the same thing should be at once in actuality and in potentiality in the same respect. And potentiality in the same respect, but only in different respects. So I am not both actually and potentially sitting. I'm actually sitting. That potentiality has been actualized fully, and I could potentially stand up. He continues, for what is actually hot cannot simultaneously be potentially hot, but it is simultaneously potentially cold. Therefore, impossible that in the same respect and in the same way, a thing should be both mover and moved. That is, that it should move itself. Therefore, whatever is in motion, or that is whatever is being changed, must be put in motion or be changed by something else. If that which is if that which it is put in motion be itself put in motion, then this also must needs be put in motion by another, and that by another again. So if one thing is caused or changed by something else, and that thing either is or is not changed itself by something else. And if it is, then that also must either be not changed or changed somehow by another. Aquinas says, this is the linchpin for this argument. He says, but this cannot go on to infinity, because then there would be no first mover and consequently no other mover, seeing that subsequent movers move only inasmuch as they are put in motion by the first mover, as the staff moves only because it is put in motion by the hand. Therefore, it is necessary to arrive at a first mover put in motion by no other, and this everyone understands to be God. So if I'm going to move this pin right here, then it can be changed as long as I'm changing it, as long as I'm holding it, okay? So the pin moves if I move it, but if I'm not moving it, it doesn't move. So let's review here. What is Aquinas saying? In a nutshell, he's saying this. Change is obvious. Change is going from potency to act, being potentially strong to actually strong, being potentially smart to actually smart, whatever. Something can only be changed from something already in act. So in order for this pin to go from here to over there, something already existing has to cause it to do that. Something can only be changed from something already in act. So one thing causing another cannot go on to infinity, Aquinas says. Aristotle says the same thing. There must be a being that is not changeable. How do we get there? Because if we can't go back into infinity by one being caused by another, that means there's got to be some being that we arrive at that is not being affected or changed by anything else. That being cannot be put together of act and potency. Because if it had potency, that means it would require potential to be what it is. And if it had potential to be what it is, it would require a reason for why it is what it is. Well, Aquinas says there can be beings like that, but that being of that, the existence of that being is going to be caused by something else. So even the existence of something is, so people have the potential not only to move, but to exist. So you and I have the potential. We had the potential before we existed to exist, or we wouldn't have ever existed. There was a sense in which that it was possible to bring about your existence, or it wouldn't have happened. If it wasn't possible, then it could never have happened. So there's got to be a being that is not put together of both potency and act. Okay, so either it's pure potency or it's pure actuality. Well, potency is not a thing in and of itself. It's not a being. It's not existence. Potency is the ability for something to exist or to be modified or changed or whatever. Well, so the being can't be pure potency because pure potency is nothing. Or it could be pure actuality because it can't be both, or it would require a change. So it could be pure actuality. Pure actuality is pure existence. And that is exactly what Aquinas says we have here. There's a being that is not changeable. And if it's not changeable, such a thing would be pure act or God. Now, there are numerous objections to this kind of argument. I'm not going to cover all of them. I mean, it can't possibly cover all of them right now. One typical objection is, well, a thing is in motion, or it just stays in motion, as long as it just happens to be in motion. So that's the first law of thermodynamics. The first law of thermodynamics is the law of physics. And I'm talking about a philosophical principle of change, going from potency to act. So the law of physics does not and cannot disprove a law of metaphysics or philosophy, because the notion of change, in the sense I'm talking about from Aristotle and Aquinas, is a philosophical and metaphysical principle, not a principle of physics. Okay. Someone can say, well, I can cause myself to move. I can make my hand move like this. Right? Well, actually, your hand isn't making itself move. Your brain is in some way is causing your nervous system to make your hand move. And ultimately that goes back to your will to cause your, whether it's conscious or not, of wanting to do that, and just does it. And ultimately what causes your will to be is going to be something, because you are a being of potency and act. You're put together in these regards. According to Aquinas, that can't go back to infinity, so there's got to be a being of pure act. So your will causes you to be able to move your hand or whatever you do, move a pen, walk around. But that goes back, so your hand movement or whatever goes back to your mind, your desire and will, which ultimately is going to be caused by something that is not a being of act and potency. Or we would have this infinite regress, which Aquinas says is impossible. So that's the first way of Thomas Aquinas, and this will set the stage for the most important attribute and the most foundational attribute that will put your philosophical theology or view of God on one of two trajectories, and we'll check that out next time.